Hi, I'm Sai, and welcome to my channel called Nugget of Wisdom. I've got a little bit of a cold at the moment, but that's not going to stop me from my sort of spontaneous desires to just express. And I guess these desires to express come from various things that have occurred since I last spoke to you, and ideas that sort of pop up in my head that actually just give me a little bit of an understanding or better understanding of some of the things that I want to talk about. And today I really wanted to talk about wisdom. I mean, I've got this channel called Nugget of Wisdom, which might make it sound like I am wise and that I am projecting some wise words or wise ideas. But that's actually not what it's not what I'm about. Originally, the Nuggets of Wisdom was all about how I had an idea of maybe getting other people to to express their wisdom. And it's something I think I'm going to do. So basically, when I meet somebody, it could be a person, a homeless person in the street. It could be a multimillionaire. It could be a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, a child. But basically, asking these people to express what they feel is wise, something wise that they've learned. Because I think wisdom is very interesting, and that I think one of the wisest things that you can possibly ever do is to realize that you're not wise. This is the paradox of life, total paradox, and it's something I think is one of the most fundamental things that we haven't really understood in our world. And in my videos, you'll see I touch on it a lot, but I haven't been able to express it in the way that I'm trying to express it now. So basically, there's great wisdom in realizing you're not wise. And that sounds crazy, I know, but let me explain. If you look at all of the challenges we have in our world today, what happens generally is that people who think they are wise often create their own sets of morals that they define based on their experience or their culture or their politics or their religion. And then in their so-called wisdom, I'll call it wisdom with a lowercase w as opposed to wisdom with a higher case w, they go off and try to basically convert everybody to their world and their worldview. And they do this genuinely, and I mean genuinely, out of a desire to help. They don't do this to destroy other people. They do this out of a desire to help. But their obsession with their recipe for wisdom puts them in a place where they believe that everything they do and say is correct and right. And therefore, if somebody else has a different view, if somebody else has a different idea, if somebody else has a different way of living, a different way of expressing, often a different culture, a different religion, those people, to them, are deemed to be unwise. And that can often manifest in dehumanization. Because these people don't have similar or the same morals and views of the world as them, they are seen as being lower life, lower beings with less intelligence, with less understanding. And so that allows these lowercase wisdom people to make decisions that are often very, very cruel. And those decisions can be about, saying, let's get rid of them. Let's restrict them. Let's imprison them. Let's make sure they have less basic access to basic human rights as the others. Let's commit acts of inhumanity on them because we don't really see them as being human like us, because we are lowercase wisdom people. And then you see on the other side the people who are now bearing the brunt of being dehumanized and being treated terribly and being disrespected and having all sorts of cruel acts perpetrated on them. They react by saying, no, we are the victims. They are the perpetrators and they are the bad ones. They are the evil ones. And if we get out of this, if we get out of this prison, if we get out of this suppression, we will take over and we will destroy them. We will get rid of them because they're not wise. We're the wise ones, not them. They're inhumane, they're bad, they're evil. We are the good ones and we are the suppressed ones, and we will stop them, and we will change the world, and we will change it to what we view as being correct and our sets of morals. And our sets of morals will be partly based on all of the cruelty that we have been the victims of. We will never allow anybody to treat our culture, our tribe, like this again. And we will stop this by bringing in all sorts of our own morals. And if you look at this, in general, you see this in the world. It's probably one of the most prominent things you will see. You will see the demonization of people who actually genuinely want to do good. You'll see the do-gooders committing acts of cruelty on others because of their ideas about it, their knowledge and their wisdom and their intellect. And you see this cycle. And, you excuse me, you only have to go onto the internet and just look. Just look. If you see one tribe that's doing very cruel things in another tribe, you'll see very quickly a dualistic response by people. And maybe by dualistic is very quickly there will be a bad side and a good side. And depending on where you look, depending on what your perspective is and where you come from and your culture and your tribe and your religion and your race and all that sort of stuff, you will take a view as to whether you're on the side of what you perceive to be good or the side of what you perceive to be evil. And then you're down a rabbit hole to nowhere. Because those who perceive themselves to be the good ones will commit acts of cruelty on the ones that they perceive to be bad. The victims who see themselves as having crimes of cruelty perpetrated on them will lash out and say, we must destroy those who are trying to destroy us. And if those who are having cruelty perpetrated on them manage to flip the coin and manage to become the controllers, the ones in charge, it is highly likely that in the end they will carry out the same acts of cruelty to those who they deem carried out the cruelty to them, even if it's a generation or generations later, even if it's the children of the children of the children of the people who committed cruelty on them. And basically what you end up with is a complete, utter, nonsense, ignorant, low-level consciousness society that is totally and utterly incapable of solving the simplest problems. That is the tragedy. That it's a bit like asking somebody to dig a big hole and giving them toothpicks to do it. Giving them 2 toothpicks to do it. Give them 5. And then you have a world created where people argue about how can we dig this hole? What's the best way to do it with toothpicks? When in reality, you can never dig a hole with toothpicks. You need a shovel. And so what I see out there on the internet, which is really now the main forum where people discuss ideas about how to solve problems, is that you cannot solve the problems that we have in our society with toothpicks. And I mean toothpicks is basically deeming ourselves on any side to be the ones, the custodians of truth, morals, justice, being the custodians of wisdom. I'm the wise one and you're not. And it doesn't matter which side you're on. If you're locked up in a cage, somebody has locked you up in a cage and imprisoned you, and every day they just give you very little to eat, you're tortured, you're brutally treated. You can go two ways with that. You can spend all of your time imagining your revenge on the people who've done this to you. Or you can have compassion for those who've done this to you. That doesn't mean that the minute you get an opportunity to escape or to knock the person out with a big rock if you see the opportunity to get away, you have to preserve your life force. You have to survive. No one can come along and imprison you and treat you in an inhumane way. But at your core, you can still be humane. In fact, if you can do that, it's more likely you will have a better plan of escape, because you won't be filled with hatred, anger, and frustration. You won't do the typical things and lash out. You're more likely to make friends with your captors, and then at some stage they will be distracted and you'll get away. Or they might start to show compassion and let you go. And so back to the very origin of what I was trying to say, my channel is called Nuggets of Wisdom. I've realized that true wisdom is anybody who believes they have true wisdom, anyone, I don't care who they are, if they happen to be the greatest guru that has ever lived, then I am suspicious. Because this world that we live in is an amazing experience, an amazing game, but we have no idea what lies outside this world. We have no idea what this truly is. We try to find out, we do all sorts of scientific assessments and analysis, and everything we do shows us that there's more. Every time we've decided that something, the Big Bang, it all started from something the size of a pea. How wise is that, really? Yes, there's evidence to say that that could have happened through these eyes. We see through our telescopes. How do we know these eyes are telling us what is the truth? So you can get to a point where you think, but what does that mean? The Big Bang? I mean, that everything came out of nothing? Well, how does that work? Oh no, now we've discovered that maybe there was something else going on. The James Webb Telescope is showing that there's, black holes 1 billion times the size of the sun. What is a black hole? And you get to a point where you realize that there's great wisdom in actually being humble and saying, we don't know, and I don't know. And there's also great wisdom in looking at others and saying, what they're doing is bad, what they're doing is terrible, what they're doing is bad for us, bad for the world, bad for society. But I have no right to really judge them, because I'm not in their shoes. I'm not the prison guard who treats me cruelly every day. I wasn't brought up in that society to hate my kind. I wasn't brought up in his society to be brainwashed into believing everything that I and my tribe did was bad. If I had been brought up in his society, I may do exactly the same things he's currently doing. I may be just as cruel as him. And how can I say I wouldn't? And so, where are the people on the internet who can look inward into themselves and say, I'm no better than any of these people. I could commit acts of cruelty, murder, aggression, if I was in their shoes. And I think once you get to that point, your perspective changes. Once you realize how little we actually know, once you take off the dogmas and the moralizations, trying to raise yourself on a pedestal relative to the others who may be mistreating you or you are mistreating. Once you start to realize that we are all one, we are all brothers and sisters in this world, and that we are all of us, capable of pretty dastardly things. Dastardly, I mean doing really cruel things to each other. And we all know this. We all know this. Every single person who's listening to this, all 10 of you, whoever listened to me, right? The truth is, you know and have had experiences where you have committed acts of cruelty or have had acts of cruelty committed on you in your life by people who were not evil or bad. And it goes down to simple things. Just look at, if a rat appears in your garden, or a rat suddenly appeared in your house running around, a little creature who's trying to live, who needs some food to feed its babies, it's young, had no choice, it was just born a rat. It lives in rat world. It has no desire to do anything nasty to human beings, but it needs to live, and it's within its digestive system. It likes to eat things that humans eat. It doesn't go to a loo to go to the toilet. It just does it on it wherever. And unfortunately for that rat, it conflicts with our idea of hygiene and what we perceive to be good, and we know it can bring infections to human beings. But look at the fright and the fear it brings, so much so that we employ people to poison them and kill them. A spider. How many people have you seen just smash a spider, kill a spider? Yet a spider is actually really good because they do great things. They're part of an ecosystem, which is really important. Your cat, that beautiful, soft, loving, unconditionally loving creature who goes outside every week and murders things left, right, and centre. Birds, mice, bats. In the playground, as children, some of the cruel things that children do to each other. Bullying and fighting, swearing, getting into little tribes where some children are left out and they're not part of the group. It goes on and on and on. But in our modern world and on the internet, we have this great idea that somehow we just divide it all up into two groups, the bad and the good, and we join the good side. You never join the bad side. No, we can never be bad. So what we do is we join what we perceive to be the good side, and the other side joins what they perceive to be good side. We perceive their side to be bad side, they perceive our side to be bad side. And we can never, ever, ever solve our problems. All we can do is keep cycling through. The perpetrators become the victims become the perpetrators. And you've never seen a greater case of this than what's happening in the Israel-Gaza conflict that's currently happening, which we all know. We all know that the mother and the child, the mother with the children who lives in Israel and the mother with the children who lives in Gaza are beautiful beings who care for their children, love their children, and want them to survive and grow. And if they could get to know each other in an environment away from all this doctrine and moralism and tribalism, they'd be best of friends. And they would both recognise very strongly that the most important thing was to protect their children so they can grow up in a healthy, safe environment. That's their natural state. Not the state that you see now, which is the victims, who are the Israelis, and all of the horrendous things that have happened to them over generations, those victims becoming the ones with the power, with the nuclear weapons, with the military, with all the sophisticated technology in their weaponry. And they become the perpetrators. And it's no surprise that if Hamas managed to win the conflict and become the leaders and the controllers and became the rulers of Israel, do you really think that they would treat those Israeli mothers and their children with compassion and love after 30,000 of their own children have been killed by the Israelis? It's highly likely they would become the perpetrators, and they would use their own religious ideology, cultural ideology, tribal ideology to configure a system where the Israelis were the ones that were basically going to have a very difficult existence, restricted, controlled existence. And every time that these conflicts occur, all it does is reinforce. I mean, I saw a really interesting short clip of a little boy, he must have been 4 or 5, looking at his dead mother and father, and I think some of his siblings. He was in Gaza. And you look at this boy and all you can see is a beautiful child starting his life. That horrific event has the potential to turn him into a really angry, bitter, enraged, cruel person when he grows up. And just to repeat the cycle, so the Israeli carrying out the cruelty on the Palestinian is returned from the Palestinian to the Israeli. And there are very, very, very few people who are willing to stop and say, let's just stop moralizing. Let's stop trying to demonize other people. Because really, what we're doing is reflecting the demons that are within us. Let's be real. Let's be honest about our lack of wisdom. Let's be honest about the fact that we're controlled by so many things. There's so much going on within us. Influences from history, from tribe, from culture, and our egos. Our egos are off the scale. And then we use the internet and media outlets to tell everybody how wise we are, and it boosts our egos. And what's even worse is the media has known this for generations. The media sets up a false narrative that the reader is the good and that the stories they produce are about the bad. So they kind of give us this ego boost. Anybody who reads our newspaper is the good. The people are the good. And the ones that we talk about can be judged as either bad or good. That's complete nonsense. The people aren't the good. The people are full of all sorts of influences, bad and good. And the only reason the media like to push this is because it triggers, it boosts our egos. There's nothing better than to sit in judgment of someone else and say, look at them. They are bad. That must mean I am good. But we're all a combination of good and bad. And to transcend that is to realize it. You can never fix anything. And I challenge you to fix anything without knowing what the real source of the issue could be. And also, but understanding what is broken. If you go and your tractor is not working, and there's 5,000 parts in that tractor could be at fault, and there's probably 20 things that are most likely to cause the problem, and you know that maybe 5 of those are really what may be going on for you in that particular issue. You go and you find out what the source of the problem is. You can never ever solve a problem by not trying to look for what the problem actually is. You know? And so part of our problem in society is that our egos are inflated. That we think we are the wise ones. We think we are the good ones and the others are the bad. That is at the core of a huge problem in our society. And, you know, for somebody like me, it's the last thing people want to hear. It's the sure way to have 0 visitors to your video channel. Who wants to hear that they're full of bad and good? Who wants to hear that they're not particularly wise? Who wants to hear that we think we know everything but we don't? Who wants to hear that we should have compassion for those people who do really bad things? And understanding. Try to understand why they're doing these things. You know, one of the reasons I've been really interested in doing this in this video is that I was in a little group discussion a few days ago in which a really, really interesting guy who I felt a lot of respect for and had a lot of interesting things to say, came out and basically said, all politicians we need to get rid of them all. Get rid of politicians, we don't need any politicians, they're all corrupt. And I said to him, I don't think that's true. Why? Well, I was a politician for 8 years. I met MPs, I met councillors, I met all sorts of people. But he was so stuck in that dogma, his view. And you think about it, all politicians, well, if you got rid of them, supposing you get rid of them all, you imprison them all. You turf them out of the positions, you hunt them out of town. All those politicians, how many would there be in the UK? Thousands and thousands of them. Then their families, their children, their wives, their grandparents. Are we saying that we would just hunt all these politicians out and just decide they're all bad? What's worse is, we would decide they were all bad, not having any clue about what the system they were really in and how that system was influencing how they behaved. You see, I spent enough time in that system to understand that the politicians in the system, and especially in the UK, where I was a politician for a while, were all constrained by so many things. And most of the politicians I met were really good people. Again, it's a paradox, and I can almost hear the energy. Wah! No, because that's your ego. That's your ego trying to pretend that you're better than them. And the people who get enraged, if they took over the mantle of being the politicians, it's pretty likely they would do the same sort of crap that the politicians did after a period of time. Just a different flavour. What you did was wrong, now I know what's right, so I will do this instead. How do you fix the problem? You embrace respect, humanity for all people. You understand that we know very little. You see things from other people's perspectives. You accept that any morals and any any ideas of wisdom that you might set up in your head may have no legitimacy whatsoever, or may be twisted and tainted by your own views, by your own history, by your own culture, your tribe, your religion. They may be nonsense. In fact, they may be even correct for that day and that time, but then in 10, 15, 20, 30 years, burning somebody at the stake is no longer morally acceptable. Just because they said the world might be round instead of flat, or that the world isn't the center of the universe. And then what do? You start to realize that out of those thousands of politicians, there's probably a few who are in control, who are dominating and pushing their agenda and constraining the others. And what you do is you start respecting, loving, understanding, appreciating the others, and trying to convince them to basically move out of the bubble they're in. Or you get to be the 10%. You make sure that through your vote, 10% of the politicians become people with different views. Not necessarily right views, but different views, new views, changed views. And then all those politicians who are caught up in that bubble start to migrate towards that 10%. And so it becomes 20%, 30%, 40%. And the world starts to change. And then you say, oh, but it doesn't matter. As soon as those politicians get in, they're going to do the same bad things. Yes, probably. But if you become self-aware enough to realize that everything you say and do is not necessarily fundamental truth and not full of wisdom, and you open your heart to listening and accepting that, oh gosh, I've made a mistake there. That's wrong. I shouldn't have done that. Yes, we need to change it. And you give your politicians the right to make mistakes. You know, we don't give, I know this from the UK, I don't really know what it's like in other countries. As soon as a politician makes a mistake in the UK, we literally destroy him or her. To the point where they will hide silly stuff like points in their licenses for driving slightly over the speed limit. They will do stuff that incriminates them for fear that they're caught out for making mistakes. Mistakes that we make in our lives all the time. And it used to be anything that was relating to, relationships. Somebody has an affair. They were completely demonized by society. When society does this all the time. So having a different approach, having an approach that's based on humanity, understanding, respect, openness, and most importantly, understanding that no one is wise. No one holds the torch of wisdom. No one holds it. You can get a lot closer to it if you can admit that. If you can admit that, yes, I F up. I do the wrong things. Who am I to judge the other person? But for our society to work and things to grow, we need to make changes. That's not judgment. That's just effectively problem solving. You can solve a problem without judgment. You know, if my tractor fails, I don't judge the tractor as evil, good, or bad. I just go in there and figure out what the problem is, and I change it. I don't moralize about it, and now the tractor works again. I don't have to sit there and create two groups, the tractor haters and the tractor lovers, and argue about it endlessly. But in the end, nothing gets fixed. Just look at what's going on today, again in Israel and Gaza. All of the talk, how many millions of people have been talking for the last few months about what's going on there. When it's clear that from a problem-solving point of view, people are dying. Children, mothers, innocent people, and by the thousands. You don't have to have a single moralization about any of it. Who's right, who's wrong. It doesn't matter. But you can fix it. It's easy to fix it by just saying we will stop. The simplest thing in the world, everybody will just down tools and we will stop killing each other. How easy is that? No moralization, no demonization, no blaming Israel, no blaming the people of Gaza, none of it. Just stop. But no, what we have to do is create a massive ego-boosting tribes on one side or the other. That talk and talk and talk, and every day that goes by, hundreds more people are being killed. And in a world where it is clear what's happening, because there are amazing people in the world who are showing us, they're taking videos, they're taking pictures, they're going to their parliamentarians and their senators and their governors and walking in and saying, stop this. They're getting up in a meeting with their hands covered in fake blood and saying, stop the genocide. Those people get demonized. The political system tries to demonize them as radicals, as terrorists, as whatever. They get thrown out of meetings. They get dragged out. Their lives are difficult, and they are performing an incredible function, which is to show us what's really happening. To give us a gift of a much higher strength, a much higher relative truth about what is really going on there. We don't have to moralize. All we have to do is say stop. And we can say stop easily. We can say stop with our vote. It's so simple. In my humble view, any political party and any politician that has not been prepared to get up in their forum, whether it's a council chamber or in a parliamentary chamber, in the Senate, a governor, whatever it might be, and put their hand up and say, I want to speak, and say, please, I want this to stop. I want us to stop sending the weapons. I want us to stop supporting this. I want us to indicate that we want a peaceful solution and we want some sort of proper truce, ceasefire. Any politician who hasn't done that should, in my view, should not get our vote. And that's not moralizing, that's problem solving. It's just problem solving. I'm not going to, if my tractor has a problem and something's causing that problem, I'm not going to leave that part in there. I'm going to take it out and replace it. It's simple. I'm not going to moralize about any of it. I'm just going to take the part out and say, no, I'm not going to use that part anymore. It doesn't fit. This is what needs to be done. So we, at the public, have got this incredible opportunity now because people have really shown us the technology of the internet, the ability for people to find out from all sorts of perspectives what is false and what is not false relatively. International institutions like the UN that weren't set up by the Russians or the Chinese, they were set up by the West, that clearly have the recent South Africa versus Israeli situation, the genocide, the UN court with respect to deeming whether there should be some sort of genocidal hearings against Israel and all of that stuff. It's easy. It's easy to see. It's very easy to see what the relative truth is here. And the relative truth is that in that particular situation, the Israeli-Gaza situation, bad things are happening. And those bad things shouldn't be happening. And that the West is endorsing those bad things to happen. And that it's no good for any of us. And that we individually have the power to stop it. Next year we have elections in the US, in the UK. Two of the countries that are having a major influence on that conflict, supporting and helping the Israelis to kill and murder thousands of people. And that's just a fact. We all know this. We all know it. We can judge and say how terrible, how cruel, how awful the West is. But the West is caught up in its own madness, its own trauma, its own ego, massive ego. And so we can easily just say, no, it's time for change. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work anymore. And we can do it with our vote. And the only reason we will not do it with our vote is because we've been brainwashed to. Oh, it doesn't matter. There's no point. We'll get the same politicians. It's a waste of time. You can't vote for independence. La, la, la. It's a load of tosh. In this whole conflict so far, the one thing that I have seen that has really, really started to trigger the politicians was when in the UK, the SNP, which is a Scottish National Party, tried to get a motion raised, or an amendment to a vote on the request for a ceasefire between Gaza and Israel. And the Labour Party and the Conservative Party basically joined forces to stop them, because they did not want all of their parliamentarians having to vote against. Because the way the wording had been done by the SNP meant that I think they were including things that would have forced the two main parties to vote against a ceasefire. And so the two main parties joined together, and then the Speaker got hit by it, because the Speaker had little choice. He was stuck. And then the Speaker was left in a position where they were calling for his resignation. It was all the Speaker, oh, what the stupid. And then we were fed a load of BS. Oh, the parliamentarians don't know what they're doing, they're stupid. And people fell for it. Oh, well, the politicians are all stupid. It's a complete mayhem and nonsense. Oh, but also we're worried about the safety of our MPs. The truth is they were triggered because they realised they were going to get caught out. And that was voting power by the SNP. Why? Because SNP are a Scottish party. They've got much stronger understanding and respect for minorities. And they had nothing to lose in the parliament. They're not part of an establishment. They're probably not connected to a big Israeli lobby group. And you can see there was a great example where a group of people had major influence. But the main parties tried to change, and the media trying to change the story into, oh, the parliament is incompetent, and, oh, the Speaker, nonsense. And so, getting back from my my long discussion about wisdom, realizing all of us that we're not particularly wise, and that we're closer to wisdom and realize we're not as wise as we think we are, and that wisdom we think we have is just ego. It's just a massive ego. We're desperate to boost ourselves. There's nothing better than to demonize the other, because that makes me feel like a god, like a saint, like the good person. And none of us are all good. We're good and bad, and we're all capable of really doing dastardly stuff. And we all know it at our core. We don't like it, we like to hide it away. And to truly have influence in the big issues in our world, the one single thing we all have is a vote. And people have the sacrifices and the loss of life to get that vote are so immense. And I have voted in elections, and I haven't voted. I have been one of those people who went, it's no point, it's a waste of time, I'm never doing it again. And I was off my trolley. Because I didn't realise that I was being had, that these stories I was being fed were brainwashing me into thinking I should give away my power. So, I can't really think, I could start going around in circles here, but I think you get where I'm coming from. I hope you get where I'm coming from. It's not the most palatable narrative. I could spend my time just boosting your ego. I'm lambasting one side, and my numbers and viewership would go through the roof, and I'd become one of these honest podcasters who tells it like it is, get rid of the politicians, they're all... But that's nonsense. It's complete and utter rubbish, and it will never work. And every time you sit there and you feel boosted by somebody who's telling you how wise they are, how unwise somebody else is, and how dastardly and nasty and evil and horrible the other side is, you can be pretty sure what they're really doing is they're just boosting your ego. And yeah, you'll go on there and you'll subscribe and you'll like, and they will strut around the place feeling like they're really important to society, but they're not doing anything, they're not fixing anything, they're not changing anything. And in the end, if they do get to be the leader, if somebody says, do you know what, you're a podcaster and you've got 10 million views, why don't you become the president or the prime minister? First of all, they'll probably say no, because they won't have a clue what to do when it comes to actually being a leader or having a leadership position. But if they do take it because they've got an even bigger ego boost and they want to be president, they will make a complete mess of it when they get into power. Or they will become the tyrants. They will become the very thing that they professed they would never be and the things they fought about on their podcasts. And I'm not saying all of them, but lots of them. And we all know this. We know it. That's the crazy part. And I've come to realize in my life is most people know this stuff. Most people know that our political system is a mess, that it's got systems in place that don't work. I mean, the House of Lords in the UK, can you honestly, anybody tell me for a second that that isn't the biggest nonsense process ever? Where you have what's called a scrutiny chamber, scrutinizing the policies of government, that's wholly appointed through special interests, through people who are given these lordships by the political parties, and mostly because of the financial benefits from these people. How on earth could that be a scrutiny chamber? It's nonsense before you even start discussing it. There's no debate about it. It's nonsense from beginning to end. We all know this. Look at the debates in Parliament. Do you see when you see the two leaders talking to each other? Have you ever seen anybody talk like that in real life? In an argument, in the street, or at home? Highly personalised egomania. Complete and utter nonsense. When you become an MP, swearing allegiance to the king? Nonsense. Complete and utter nonsense. That's a monarchy, not a democracy. How can you mix two directly opposing systems and have to have a democracy swear allegiance to a monarchy? Complete nonsense. MPs, tell me, in your constituency, how much power does an MP have, direct power, in a constituency, to make sure that the people he was elected by get the best service? Because that's what they're there for. He was elected by a constituency of people to represent them. Does he have any power if a hospital is going to get closed, if a major highway is not going to get built, if all the nursing homes and children's homes are going to get closed down? Tell me how much power he has locally to stop the local authorities from having any making decisions on things that reflect really big changes within his constituency. How much power does he have? Zero. In the UK, zero. His only power is through national government and through his vote within a political party. Nonsense. Complete and utter nonsense that people don't even realise. So when we say, oh, well, politicians are no good, half the time the system that the politicians work within in the UK is a nonsense system. And probably a lot of them do a really, really good job on trying to figure out ways around it to get the things they need for their local communities. What I discovered, which was really fascinating, was that one of the most powerful positions in Parliament was to be an independent, to be a totally independent MP. And yet the people have been told, no, it's rubbish, the independence is a waste of time, you'll never be able to change anything. But the great thing about being an independent MP in Parliament would be that you have the freedom to speak. You have the freedom to just say what you really think and to lobby and to push, to put your hand up and say, no, I disagree with this. There's a lady called Claire Daly. She's an MEP in the European Parliament. Just type her in on YouTube. Just look at what she's doing in the European Parliament. She's one of the most interesting and empowering people because she's articulate, she's clever, she's open. She does not mince her words. She tells it like it is. She expresses her view as an elected representative. Isn't that what it's supposed to be about? Isn't that what being elected representative is supposed to be about in the first place? But most of you have been convinced that even that being independent is a wasted vote. So, the most important lesson here from my rant is wisdom, really. What is wisdom? And if you think you are better than somebody else, if you think that you know more, if you think you have the high ground, if you think your morals are the right morals and theirs are wrong, if you think you wouldn't do the things that they do, if you think you haven't got the ability to be cruel, to be nasty, to be bad, to commit acts of violence, to be prejudiced, to be racist, if you think you're none of those things, then you're living in a fantasy world, because we're all capable of doing these things. And as soon as we realize this and we change the way we debate and we start talking to each other and respecting each other and understanding each other, then we will stop fueling the poison, fueling adding the energy to these conflicts, which turns them into dualities, which really makes it difficult for anyone to fix anything. You know, my tractor analogy, the broken tractor, and it just needs a part replaced. Having two groups, one each side of the tractor, just arguing with each other about who's wrong and who's right. Which side is the bad side? Who drove the tractor to the point where it broke? Whose fault was it that the tractor got broken? Well, let's break up into two groups. The tractor abusers and the tractor saviors. And let's just fight each other, and let's just argue, and then who'll get control of the broken tractor? Well, let's see. We will have a massive war, and it'll be, in the end, one group will get to control the broken tractor. It's still a broken tractor. Nothing's been fixed. All the wisdom in the world has made no difference. Perceived wisdom with a lower W, lowercase w. It's been absolutely no difference. So what could we do? We could down tools. And we could say, okay, let's forget all this arguing and moralization and trying to demonize each other. Let's stop killing each other first. Let's stop killing each other. Let's stop fighting each other. Stop that, right? Because that's not working. That's not going to fix the tractor. And then let's talk to each other and figure out what is wrong. Let's get around the tractor and do a proper analysis on what happened and where it was driven, and is it the oil? Is it the fuel? Is it the engine? Is it the steering wheel? Is it a deflated tire? Is it a drive shaft? Whatever. And then we might just discover it's fairly simple. It's just run out of fuel. That's it. We just need to pour some fuel in, off we go. It really is as simple as that. And the crazy thing is, and people don't like hearing this either, is I believe almost all the problems we have in the world today that we have influence on as human beings. You know, we don't have influence potentially on a meteor hitting the Earth or huge climatic events, but we can mitigate. We can find ways to basically reduce the blow from some of the terrible natural disasters that occur. But on the things that we have got significant control over, killing of each other, with modern technological weaponry, all these things. The problem is so simple to fix, it's embarrassing. And again, most people will be triggered by this because they want to believe it's complicated. The reason why the world is just stays because all these complicated things, there's nothing complicated about any of it, it's easy. The complicated part of it is our minds and our approach to these problems. And our egos which are inflated beyond belief, that are almost inflated to bursting. With morals that are nonsense, that have no validity, with our judgment of others, our hatred of others, our hatred of each other, that's really where our problem lies. Our desperation to have two sides, the good and the bad, and to be on one side or the other. Our desperation never, ever, ever to accept that there's bad within us. That's the core of our problem. Once we get across that problem, once we actually start to realize this, then everything changes. And I'm sure there have been lots of people in the world who really embodied what I'm trying to say, but there's one man in particular who did, and that was Nelson Mandela. And if you look at the history of Nelson Mandela, lots of people will say, oh, but he was in prison for like 20 plus years. The evil apartheid system. And he was discriminated against because of his colour, because of his background. Pretty horrendous to spend that time in prison. But how did he react? He completely transcended it all. And he is one man, I think, that I really, really have great respect for. And it's interesting today that it's South Africa which has intervened with the Gaza Israeli conflict. And in that courtroom, you had white and black judges, part of the same group, calling out Israel. I mean, how incredible is that? And how many lives were saved in that country? That country could have become an Israel-Gaza situation, with civil war and people deciding, I'm going to live in this part and you're going to live in that part. Could have been disastrous. And they have problems. I'm sure they have problems, like everywhere. But, you know, Nelson Mandela was trying to sort getting the tractor fixed and looking at how you could do the fixing. He wasn't interested in inflating his ego. He wasn't interested. He could have come out and been vitriol, had hatred for the white South Africans and created a massive tribe of unbelievable ego. And he didn't. He was truly a man that I have a deep respect for, and I think much closer to being wise than most any world leader I've come across in modern history. And if Nelson Mandela was president of America today, I believe we would see a very different outcome in the Gaza-Israeli conflict. At least he would have said stop, and he would have used his power, the power and control he would have had over the military in the US and internationally, to basically pull those two sides apart and to stop any more killing. He would have done it. He would have that influence. And that's just a fictitious. I do understand that he's not American, so he couldn't have been a president, but just pretend. Imagine if he could have been. And what you got in America now is basically you've got a choice. You've probably got 100,000 people in America or more who would make amazing leaders. We're wise, experienced, empathic, clever, and you've got basically the choice of a quite ignorant, conservative, I would say low level of consciousness, Biden, who is also having aging issues. As he gets older, he's clearly his ability to remember things, to articulate himself, is reducing, which is not unusual for his age. And then you've got a narcissist on the other side. In Trump. Two guys that have absolutely no hope of even starting to make society, to fix the tractor in America. All they do is polarize. They polarize people into groups. There'll be the anti-Biden, pro-Biden, anti-Trump, pro-Trump. And it doesn't matter which of those two get in. First of all, neither are focused on fixing anything. That's number one. The second problem is they're not really the ones in charge in the US. And we all know this as well. They will have the legislations and the bills and the contracts put in front of them. Then they'll sign them. And half the time they won't have a clue what they're signing. They're also stuck in ego, massive ego. Self-righteous, they believe they're right. They believe they're wise. They believe everything they say is true. And there's no hope of solving anything in that situation. But the American population have a choice. There are several candidates that are still up for election. And if the American public could just see that basic fact of how can you have are these two guys seriously the best American can do? This technological country with innovation and all sorts of stuff. Take the egotistical approach. America, the greatest country in the world. You've got the greatest candidates. If you're the greatest country in the world, how on earth can you have candidates who clearly you would not select to be the manager of a McDonald's? Either of them. So Americans totally have the power to elect some of these other candidates. And yeah, you might elect somebody in power who's not particularly, PR savvy or particularly clever when it comes to the systems in the US, but you will start to change the system. Once the people show that they're no longer interested in this bullshit narrative, that you must vote for, Democrat or Republican, that the issues voters can vote for other people. It doesn't matter what they're connected to. You transform politics. You will change the narrative in the US. And even those political parties will have to come along and select people who are much better if they want to have a chance. But if you let the system brainwash you into believing a load of nonsense, you walk away from the system and don't vote, or you just vote tribally, then you will get what you deserve, basically. So you can see in that world, there's real opportunity for Americans, just with their vote, to change it all, just like that. Anyway, that's it really. It was really important for me to express this because it's not expressed anywhere. It's just not expressed anywhere. And I feel a bit like I'm rambling. But it does surprise me how we're all so caught up in the world of ego that we don't realize that it's ego which is actually the problem. And the ego will make any problem sound like it's impossible to solve unless we follow some sort of bullshit narrative. It's the ego that makes problems difficult to solve. The problems themselves in our world are so simple. I was a product designer for years. I had some really difficult problems to solve, where it was multiple variables and I was trying to figure out how could I make this work. When I was a politician in politics, the problems it was so simple. The real issue was the people and their stories and their cultures and their tribes and their dogmas, their religious beliefs. It was the people and their obsession with being right, their obsession with being the ones that held the baton of truth, their ability to listen to others, to respect others, to be empathic, to be kind, to be open, to listen to lots of ideas, to brainstorm, to use really clever, logical tools to look at problems and fix them. No, it was a whole culture of ego that was the problem, not the problem, actual problem itself. Look at Gaza and Israel. What is the problem now? It's people, young people, probably conscripted in many cases, on both sides, going out with weaponry and killing people. How do you stop that? You just stop it. You just say, I'm not going to do this. Oh, but that's very, very difficult to do. No, it's not. It's easy because you know that the US is supporting Israel financially and with weaponry and so on. We know that Iran is supporting Hamas and so on. So it's easy. You get those people around the table and you say, we're not going to demonize either side, but the killing must stop. We all agree the killing must stop. If these were your children or your family, you would definitely want it to stop. So what we do is we pull back and stop giving these people weapons. and support. And then we come up with some sort of process to decide how we can move on from there. It's so simple. But just look at what's actually happening. Nothing is happening. People are bullshitting every day from all sides. The people who are arguing about it, the people who are moralizing about it, the people who are doing it, they're all coming from different egoistic perspectives, which will never ever solve the problem there. And they know it to a certain degree because they don't want to solve the problem. For them, the problem is not trying to stop the killing of people. For them, the problem is the people. So therefore, the longer they just keep talking, the more of those people are going to basically get killed. The more the war will continue. So yeah, very, very straightforward to solve if we as human beings could be humble and admit that, we're not as wise as we think we are. There's great wisdom in realizing that we're not that wise, and that wisdom comes from listening and learning and problem solving with others, respecting others and understanding what's motivating others to do the things they do, even if those things are bad, and that we could do those bad things ourselves. Anyway, thanks for listening, and hope to speak to you again in the future. Bye-bye.